Actually 5 now. Just missing Doug, it looks like.
Yep.
Okay. All right, first off, tonight, little work session here. First of all, with regard to a MOU between the city and the liquor stores, then an NPD credentialing accreditation update prior to the regular meeting at 7 p.m. So, Mr. Manager, we'll let you start out if you wouldn't mind.
As you all know, over the last several months, there's been a lot of discussion about alcohol consumption and the role that may or may not be played by the two local dispensaries, which cover 3 stores. And this has been, a lot of this discussion has been also with the the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Organization to discuss this, and their direction. Some of you attended their public meeting back in June, and their direction was for the city to work with the 2 local companies, which is Cars Safeway and Northwest Commercial, to see if an MOU could be developed. MOUs are are numerous throughout the state of Alaska when communities have raised issues with local dispensaries. The 2 companies met themselves. They met with the mayor and they came back with recommendations on 6 items. The 7th item that we want to add is that we'll resume what was done years ago. The police department, through the state's attorney's office, will supply them the list of folks that have gone through the judicial system and that have conditions of release involving alcohol for themselves. The idea is that the stores will share information on people that they're not selling to, also on runners, because that is a common problem. And the other issue is to stop the sale of small bottles of alcohol, which can be very well hidden. And I can tell you, I've dealt with that on a personal basis as we've worked with the homeless population that's been around City Hall to make sure that they're not hiding bottles in their jacket, even though, as I have said to them, every time I see you with a Gatorade bottle, I'm sure it's got alcohol in it. I'm not stupid. So these are the recommendations. The 6th, the 7th is what they asked the city to participate in, and essentially we have just gotten a rough draft from Brooks, adding all the flourishes to it. And frankly, I'm hoping that, and I think the Alcohol Control Board is looking for you to hopefully accept this, and that it be not by ordinance, but by agreement, and that there would be a periodic meeting when necessary. And to outline, the stores would close on Sunday, except for special events. Package stores shall not sell spirits in less than 750 milliliter, and no larger than 1.75 liters. And obviously, they would be allowed to deplete their inventory. The minimum retail price for spirits would be at least $20. Licensees shall limit the retails spirits, beer, wine which are exempt to a single container per day per individual possessing valid identification. in the case of two valid identification holders in the same transaction, 2 bottles may be sold. All sales of spirits to a business entity are exempt from this bottle limit. Licensees will keep and maintain a written record of all customers who are denied from purchasing alcohol due to the possession of a fake or an invalid ID and or being intoxicated, if required by the city of Nome in writing, and it is already in writing anyway by ACs. Licenses will share this with other local alcohol licenses via weekly email notifications, and that the licensees and the city of Nome will meet every 6 months starting in March 2023, which I would really think, John, it might be, it might be a little later based on where we are in, this time, to discuss and evaluate the effectiveness of these conditions and to allow for the modifications of the conditions as the parties see fit. And then the number 7, which is not on there but has been agreed to verbally in their conversations with me, is about sharing the those who have conditions of release related to alcohol. We used to share that information apparently with the stores years ago, according to Mr. Earthman, when I discussed this issue with him, and he's not sure why it stopped.
Workload is why it stopped. So I guess, Chief, are you ready to make any comment on how, or Glenn even, on how we think what the state of affairs is today? To me, it seems like there's a marked change. I'm not seeing what I saw for a while. Maybe I'm just blind.
Well, remember, things right now, it's so cold out, people are inside. This is more of a seasonal issue when we see a lot of it when it's out in the open. I will tell you, this summer, we caught 2 people literally running a dispensary right outside of City Hall, where the bottle would come out, cash would be exchanged, and that was interrupted. Even a month ago, we had people on Saturday, the guy went across the street, bought from AC's, came back after I had told another fellow they couldn't stay on the porch and smoke. They thought I had left and were surprised when I came back around the corner because the expedition was there, and the guy was pouring a drink for the guy, and the guy was still smoking too, but and I chased him away. So yes, it's still happening, and it's obviously happening still behind the visitor center.
And Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager, I could comment. We got one officer that works tonight who's been very vigilant, Ted. I know he has quite the collection he brings in of bottles, Monarch bottles every night, And then they're just the bottles. He has them poured out. So I know he's been out there doing some enforcement, and that's just a positive change too. So.
But a lot of these are the smaller Monarch bottles.
Yes,
it's the
yes,
the $10, $11 bottle that you see across the street.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just looking at it. I just had a couple questions, and I made some notes here, and I guess my first question is, so the first one, it's closed on Sunday. What's the rationale or the purpose behind closing on Sunday? I mean, what's
The date
that the store's proposed?
the stores proposed.
I'm just wondering,
My suspicion,
it's tough to staff on Sundays.
either tough to staff on Sundays or
Low
it's
volume.
the slowest days of the week.
And I guess, was there any discussion about, instead of closing on Sunday, which is a low volume day, I'm sure, in town staff, about closing shorter hours each day? You know, instead of 11 to 10, something shorter than that. And I know we've talked about it in previous meetings, but.
We could go back and.
Well, no, I just, with the MOU discussions, was that brought up?
It was brought up briefly. You know, we've been, John and I have been, the mayor and I have been trying to balance this and to balance this with, you know, the 90-some% we were not having a problem with there, to be able to get their availability in liquor. I mean, it could come about, and now as part of this, there is an option in here that, you know, after we sit down and review this in 4 to 6 months, say, you know, maybe we should try some shorter hours instead of closing on Sunday. I mean, that's the purpose of trying to develop this MOU, that there is a working, you know, it could be the mayor, it could be one council member, it could be the city manager, just, you know, the representatives from the city meeting and reporting back. I mean, this was, I really think, the first step.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm not disputing whether an MOU is a good idea or not. I was just wondering what the motivation or purpose was of closing on Sunday. That's all. If it actually reduces alcohol consumption, traffic, sales, and as opposed to the shorter hours.
Well, I also think that was giving, hopefully, some relief to city services having to respond.
So you think by closing on Sundays, it will?
Well, that was one of their
No,
ideas,
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
That's not an argument.
One of whose ideas? One of the store's ideas.
the store's ideas.
Sure, that's, yeah. And again, I guess just the overarching goal of this is to reduce a lot of the city-related services associated with the alcohol. That's the motivation. So that's why I asked the question.
And the manager,
Yeah, well,
Hanson's is.
yeah, well, thank you, Laura, for coming. I just wanted to comment with regard to the hours and shortening hours. You know, I guess I don't know that was so much a discussion with the stores themselves, but how many times didn't we have people in here saying, if you know, you can shorten it, you can move it, you know, that if you move it an hour, you're only moving the problem, you're not fixing the problem.
Mhm.
And it didn't seem like, you know, shaving an hour off a day or even 2 hours off a day was going to make that much of a difference. Or the recommendation was certainly not or as I understood it, kind of the thought was, don't strip it off the beginning of the day, because if you open later, you're just going to push the problem so that, you know, less people are available potentially to respond at that point, and that the even, you know, shutting it down at, you know, say 8 as opposed to 10 in the evening really didn't seem to be where that there would be, wasn't felt there would be impact from that.
Yeah, and I'm not.
So
There wasn't. I realized the council didn't support earlier, you know, shortening the hours, and that's just what I was. If this is like, well, this is the best we can get, we'll close on Sundays. That's all. So, I didn't.
go ahead.
Laura?
Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
the closed on Sunday, AC proposed that the rationale was for, to give EMS and city services a day break, basically. That is what had been discussed.
And do you agree that there will be? You're the manager for Hanson's, correct?
I am, yeah.
Do you think that it will help to reduce overall liquor sales by closing on Sunday? I mean, I'm assuming it's the lowest sales volume of the week, the days.
I don't know if I can share that. I do have somebody else on the call. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's fine. I'm just making the assumption. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Personally, I don't know that it'll make.
Sort of, I guess.
Just, we have a hand up here, we'll take, Sig, please.
Well, I would, once we put it in place, we would use the C1 is how much call volume is different from previous Sundays that we have. And we would also see if the volume is being pushed into other days. You know, obviously, we can take a look as staff, we can look at their sales tax to see if, you know, we're collecting as much sales tax after you take into consideration inflation. So we'd be able to look to see if it has lowered alcohol sales, and then we would be able to have a conversation with EMS, the police department, and the hospital to see if they've seen any change by, in the court system, stopping people who have conditions of release placed on them, and to see if we're still seeing the number of people violating their conditions of release. So we do have some, you know, we can develop those guidelines to, or matrix to see if it's effective or not. Does that answer your question, Sig?
Thank you. Okay, Mark.
May I ask what Joe's role is with the local Hanson store here?
Joe,
Thank you. So I did hear you mention that you had experience with the Bethel alcohol liquor sales. And I assume with the other stores that are in Anchorage, were there not measures put in place in different areas of the city possibly? And wondering if what your take in was on any effect of those measures, either relating to Bethel or to relating to areas of Anchorage if they put in certain restrictions in areas. I know it was in the news that they're talking about it. I don't know whether that happened or not. So I was curious to know if you.
And I think through all these discussions that we had, both entities, both store and their corporate leadership certainly were willing and open to discuss ways that this problem could be resolved. But just like the city that can't definitively say this, and this is going to fix the problem, neither can they. And so this would be kind of a start of a different relationship moving forward, and then provide a mechanism for tweaking it along the way. If this doesn't work, is there something else we can try? And so while this thing about meeting every 6 months, maybe I guess that was to set specific meetings, but the discussion also was, as I recall, that it was more frequently as requested by the city. So. Yes, please, go ahead. It could be either. I mean, it's more of a wholesale thing, I think was the thought. But it also would not prohibit some company or organization which in the community that wanted to have an employee Christmas party from going out in and buying, a variety of brands or types of spirits for that event. It would not require that they send an employee down for 30 days every day to buy for their Christmas party. Yep, I think that pretty much, and it was then there are businesses, there are other alcohol bars in town that have and do utilize the liquor stores for their, as their vendors. They don't all necessarily go to the Anchorage,
And
big
this,
distributors, I guess.
and Mayor, to add to what you said, this was an issue that was raised when we were having these discussions. What happens if my company wants to have a party or something like that? Would I be restricted? And there was discussions when this body met, no, that's not what the intent was, if we did something like this.
And then, they don't do it, but, let's just say that there's, because the alcohol and hazards don't work, or alcohol doesn't mix with a hazardous job location. But there are, say that there was a birder group, I'll use them as opposed to a mining company or something, that has they have their birders up here and they want to, have alcohol available at dinner. Or I shouldn't use a name, but there's a little resort, I think, on the other side of Anvil that I don't know whether in connection with their meals that they might offer a beverage or two. And whether they could, whether we would be simply promoting all of those sales coming out of Anchorage directly and bypassing Nome, as opposed to having it something that could be a local revenue generator. And certainly they're not the problems for us, but trying to figure out how to address all of the um, various dynamics and different situations in Nome is a challenge, and through trying these and then coming up with other potential ideas on an ongoing basis, so that we're not locked into any of these things long term if they don't work, and we wish to have some other modifications. So I think that although a memorandum of understanding usually is an agreement between the parties, I think the city probably has more of a hand to impose if they desire. The cooperation is always a good thing. Sig? Well, that's a good point, and something that figuring out how to be able to address those things, and I mean, maybe there needs to be more. The thing on the special events was more having to do with the closure date. And then, I mean, as it's written, it's specifically a business entity, so private individual holding a wedding would not be exempt by the letter of this writing. But I think that's something that should be.
Well, you could possibly have, Mayor, a permit that would be submitted and that it could be reviewed, and they would be given a release where we would notify, we could pick up the phone and call the liquor store and say this party has the right. I mean, because if you are too loose, there will be people that will be coming in and trying to exploit that. And I just think that we need to be cautious about it. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to have a negative impact on somebody's wedding.
When you mentioned that, and Sig, your hand is still up, did you have a follow-up? Okay. I guess, I mean, as it is right now with alcohol sales within the state of Alaska through the ABC board, there are special events permits, at that level. And, for Iditarod, for the banquet each year, beer and wine is associated with it, but there has to be agreement by the governing body that they, yes, they're resolved to do this. Then it has to go through the local law enforcement department to get their approval before the ABC board will approve it. So, I mean, there is that's not an unusual, I guess, and a good concept, I think, Glenn, to explore.
Okay.
Offhand if that permit, I'm familiar with that too. Offhand if that's within city limits or if
Yes, it's anywhere, because that allows K&L or one of those people in Anchorage cannot sell to Iditarod, for instance, without having that permit in place. So they have to get that permit, and then the distributor can make the sale.
I mean, this does not have an impact if people want to buy online and have it shipped up.
Yeah, but let's, as part of this, I think we need to balance, the,
Okay.
or should consider that whether some people say it's not a local benefit, the folks that have advocated selling alcohol in a different way are talking about having those local sales and sales taxes, to provide services. So, if, we're all, any alternatives on revenue, I mean, that should be a consideration in my mind. Others on the phone, or on the meeting here, didn't want to skip anybody that might want to add something? Yeah, go ahead, Cam. Well, the city of Nome already by ordinance has put special events in place. There are some special events that are already specifically called out for a deviation from the normal hours, both on bars and liquor stores, I believe. At least on bars there are. And I guess I would envision that this would be something that, this process would be in place and it would be more of an administrative thing than a legislative thing. I just said so.
I do have mixed feelings about it, for one thing, but also that now that I look at that number one where it says operations will be closed on Sunday except for special events as specified in the city, does that mean then that if there's a special event going on, then the city and the package store would plan ahead that they're gonna also be open that Sunday? Is that the intention?
I would say so.
I think it would fall under NCO 3.05.040, hours of sale. Section D, the council may provide by resolution for other exceptions to subsection B, which is the hours of sale. Something along those lines. When the Crystal Serenity came in here in 2016, the council passed a resolution so that the bars and restaurants could be open and serving alcohol when the passengers were here rather than the 1 to 8, I think is the.
Right, but in order for that provision to trump this provision, this is a voluntary provision here.
True.
And so, if indeed we just don't want them open on Sundays, we need to change that.
May I suggest, first of all, as city manager, I would be notifying the council that there would be an exception. Now, we could put in there that this, in the ultimate agreement, that the city manager will have to seek approval from the council for a special event on a Sunday.
What you just said, John, was that this wasn't necessarily gonna go into city code or what?
No, this is simply a memorandum of understanding that is adopted and agreed by the parties that then can be changed as we go through to come up with other, see what works, see what doesn't work, and if we ultimately come up with some of these things that we want to be permanent, then those should be adopted into the code, I would say. More, Scott?
Oh, I wanted to let everybody else take their turn.
Yeah, no, I'm
Um,
calling you next.
just going through the list on number 2, where it looks like we don't sell bottles of liquor that's under a fifth, 750 milliliters, is that a fifth? It's a fifth. And then we're larger than, sort of having this range of sizes once everybody sells what they've got. What's the thought process you had mentioned earlier about people being able to hide it. Is that the motivation for kind of restricting the size of bottles?
Well, one is, that is part of the restriction, so it's can't be as easily hidden, especially in the, more warmer seasons that, and I say that a little tongue in cheek at times.
It's gonna be 35 degrees tomorrow, so we're in warm season again.
And the other thing is that it's more readily available when it's less money. So, when people get first, and I hate even having to speak like this, but they get able to scrape together $10, or two or three folks can scrape $10. They're right across the street or right up the street. Hopefully this will slow down some of this. I mean, this is just an interim step to a much larger solution. I mean, I want the hospital needs to be more involved. The day shelter needs to be more involved on this.
No, I'm not. I'm just
I know, I
questioning,
mean-
and I'm not grilling it. I'm just wondering
I'm
what
not-
the thought process is by restricting the bottles. What my thinking is, it will actually potentially increase alcohol sales because, if you don't have small bottles, that doesn't mean you're gonna, turn away and not buy anything. You're gonna buy whatever's available in the biggest one. And I guess I think about it from, if you go out to dinner and eat a small dinner, you're gonna eat what's on your plate. If you go and order a big dinner, you're gonna still try to eat what's on your plate, right?
Well,
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well-
Yeah, right. So I think you understand that's why I'm not arguing, Glenn. I'm just trying to understand the thought process behind restricting these sizes. I do get they're easily concealable, but beyond that, I guess I don't understand the motivation.
Well, I think the idea is looking at what other communities had done. They looked at increasing the value, the dollar value, and trying to discourage consumption. That it was more expensive, it would be more, you'd have to save more money or do whatever. Yeah, the reality is, and an alcoholic can't just drink one drink. And we all know that. They, if it's, they're going to constantly have to go around and find alcohol once they're they're in that mindset of a drunk.
And so I'm just asking, I mean, I can understand you conceal it, but it's pretty easy to conceal a fifth. I mean, I did it in high school quite a bit. And the question is, are we actually going to be selling more alcohol because we don't have smaller quantities available versus more? That's the only question I have. And if you're only looking for a pint, but you go for a fifth, that's going to, you get my point. So that it's just a question. I'm not trying to debate
And
it.
that's one of the things we would be looking at in the matrix.
Yeah. Another question, if you don't mind, John.
No, go right ahead.
What's the thought process behind the retail setting a floor on the price for bottles at $20?
That was actually a recommendation. It was either from ACs. I think it was from ACs. But it was it was part of the discussion that from ACs and cars.
And my recollection of some of that discussion was, okay, let's just level the playing field. That, we don't want one person selling alcohol at, $21 and somebody at 19, that, and that, it had to do with product and just setting, we wanted to take And because, and I think that we were talking about that from the city side of having a price floor, that, you know, you had some basically, so the two entities were not, we're getting into not having them compete with each other on the thing, and, one lowering it and moving it from one side to the other. But also that, if, rather than have, folks running with a $10 bill, it's a little harder, potentially, and could cut down on the amount of it by requiring a larger and set price.
Sure. So maybe by setting the price higher, I'm assuming that there's prices, and I've got the experts in the room. I hope you don't mind me asking, what's the lowest price of a fifth?
We actually set a floor a few months back, just as our store, and our lowest price of a fifth is $18.99. And so the cheapest bottles, they're gonna be $18.99, but it didn't raise the prices of the standard. If you wanted to buy a bottle of.
An internal pricing
Yeah,
decision.
it would still be the same.
So it's an internal pricing decision for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
The reason is because the most popular bottle is $20.
You
I
know,
know that that's the problem I guess I have with this, is that it's not really necessarily going to solve the issue of what we're trying to solve, because the most popular bottle there is a $20 bottle of vodka that's being sold.
yeah,
So
and-
are we changing that by, so, and that's the
Well,
part I don't understand.
Monarch right now, and I'm sorry I don't know all my sizes, I'm a little out of,
I don't know either.
Yeah,
so
but
don't feel bad.
if I go over across the street, Monarch, the popular bottle that I see right now being used is, I think it's $10.79.
we're smaller than a fifth.
Smaller. And there's all sorts, and the Red Cap
Sure.
gets a reputation. There are other bottles of alcohol, spirits over there that might be $11.50. I mean, there's a whole range, and I don't mean to pick on ACs across the street, but that's been, my quick walkthrough, and the community was back and forth on what the pricing is. I mean, we may turn around and find, because there was conversation of selling smaller sizes. And then the conversation went back to selling larger sizes and then setting a floor price that both companies could agree to, but they would still be competitive with their higher premium brands, so that we were not restricting the marketplace.
Yeah. Again, same question, is it really going to have an effect of reducing consumption or abuse or whatever? That's my only question. I mean, it's an interesting exercise basically in legalized price fixing. And if I did that with fuel, I'd probably go to jail. And I'm joking, but is it really going to have the effect, or are we essentially setting a floor for the alcohol distributors to make more money? And and I'm not saying that's the intended effect, but is that a possible effect? Is it really going to do anything? It's just a question.
And I'm not, that there is a search for what can be done. And when we've had interactions with the AMCO, they kind of guided us to work with the alcohol dispensers because they said there's a problem. And they wanted us to work together and to come up with a recommendation that they will bless themselves to see if this can reduce the problems that we're seeing in the community. And at the same time, we're trying to, as we've heard from another constituency, not to impact those folks who are consuming responsibly. And I think that's what we've been struggling with. And they are looking for us to either move forward or just step back. And, we can still provide the information, but they have spent a lot of time up here, AMCO in particular, to try to assist us in coming to some agreement to try something to restrict alcohol.
And I guess on that point of trying something, I guess what I'm trying to search for here is, if we take these actions, what's the motivation and how is it going to affect anything besides just, well, somebody recommended it, let's try something. And I think we ought to have a little bit of understanding of how this is going to work. Kind of like Sig said earlier, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the measurement? What's the thing we're doing? So, but I get your point.
Well, let me answer that.
Sure.
What, from my perspective as the city manager, what I'm trying to see done is a reduction on city services. I'm also hoping to see a reduction in sexual assaults, which take place because of over use of alcohol. I mean, in those two things, we are on target, I guess, right now, Chief, for 60, 65.
58 right now.
Okay, sexual assaults. This community shouldn't even have probably one a year. And I'll bet you they're all related to alcohol.
Oh, yes, I'd say 100%.
And we have people here out in our community that, if they are heavily intoxicated and no one knows they're down, they're going to be dead. This community puts a lot of energy into the nest right now to make sure that 30 people on average are taken care of. And then you have those who couch surf. I mean, if this reduces the problem 15, 20%, I would mark it as a success. But alcohol is a problem in this community. It is a problem with maybe a smaller percentage that, and that is what we're addressing. And that's what these other communities in Anchorage, and I'm sure Mr. Ryback would agree with that, because they've had problems and this is what they've tried.
Nobody's going to disagree that those are great goals. Of course, we all support that, Glenn. I guess I'm just trying to understand how these specific things that we're doing is going to potentially affect alcohol consumption. Going like on number 4, that's very clear. It's very easy to see if you limit the amount of bottles, I think 1 per customer per day. Yes, that would reduce a lot of the bulk buying, or that's very clear to see how that would hopefully reduce alcohol consumption and purchases in large quantities. I guess the question I have on that is how would we track that, and are there any privacy issues to be concerned about?
Well, once again, I have seen ACs implement that and tell a customer they could buy 1 bottle. A lot of this is also a gentleman's or an agreement between 2 companies saying we are going to enforce the same rules.
It's a handshake, sure.
And if either party break it, then we have a problem. So we are looking at them to say, someone comes in, okay, you've come in, you've gotten your bottle for the day. That's fine. And realistically, they're going to go down the street to the other dispenser, whichever way you're going, and they'll be able to get 2 bottles.
Which is a great segue into, I'm just about finished here, into number 5. It indicates on, keeping a written record of folks that are denied for fake or invalid ID or intoxication. And it says, if required by the city of Nome in writing, this list will be shared with NPD. on a weekly email. Why don't we, is that
Is shared by where? Where are you reading in PDF?
number 5? Well, I assume it's this,
You're running the sentence a little together.
if required by the city of Nome in writing, the licensee will share this list with other alcohol licenses. Am I reading that correctly?
With other
Right, but-
alcohol licensees, which are between themselves. It's not with the city. We don't want that information.
Okay, so we would have to require it in writing that
Well, we-
AC shares it with Hanson's.
And
That's
they've
what it
already,
says.
part of this gentleman agreement, if that's what we want, that's what they will do.
Okay, yeah, so, okay, okay, then that makes sense.
The city is not,
We're not getting this
collecting or
information.
keeping lists.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, if I don't know why the city would require in a writing that the two companies share it. I mean, if it's an agreement. So, again, I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. I guess my thoughts are, this is designed to reduce, well, I assume the assumption is that it's designed to reduce alcohol consumption, the load on city services and the crime associated with high alcohol intoxication. And that's why I think it's a great idea. I think it's a good first step. But I just want us to be able to say, this is why we're reducing the size of bottles. It's to hide them from being hidden or something. I do have a few concerns about the effectiveness of it. I can definitely understand from a business perspective why they're being recommended. But I think that, as long as we have a good thought approach, and I think also having follow-ups, whether it's 6 months, I would actually request that we have them more frequently, maybe 3 months, to say, okay, how's this working? Is there some adjustments that we need to make? And that's
And actually, that one-
because a lot can happen in 6 months and people forget.
And that's a good point, because we did, and I don't understand why it changed, but originally we discussed meeting every 3 months,
Quarterly,
quarterly, and then, seeing what results were happening or not happening, then to come back and do another review to see what's working and what's not.
And I would also request that a council member be involved in that. That's not me necessarily, but just have city council involvement because of kind of the interest of this topic. Thanks.
Fully support that.
That's all I've got. Thanks, John.
I know you mentioned that, I see there's 2 people from Hanson's or from Car Safeway here. Thank you very much. Where is AC?
I don't know where they are.
Okay, and the other question I have that's always
We
frustrated me.
didn't tell them that this was coming to the agenda, I don't believe.
I thought
did
they
we?
were notified.
Okay.
I mean,
And the other, I guess, frustrating part I've had throughout, for years since we've been discussing this, is where is Norton Sound? This is a health issue, and where is that? Where are they in helping to, as a community? And I know they do a lot of good things. Like I printed out the amount of money that is coming into town prospectively if Senator Mikowski's wish list comes to be. Nome's going to get some really good benefits and quite a bit to Norton Sound for some big projects. But one thing I don't see on there is where is the alcohol treatment center that the community's been talking about for years and years and years. And so, to me, having government try to come up with a solution is frustrating when other parts of the community aren't here trying to help with that decision.
And we did try that. We had meeting after meeting after meeting, and pretty soon, the group got so large that it lost focus of what it was supposed to be doing. It turned more into individual program reports than trying to solve the problem. And that.
and
The thing about it is that a good committee is 3 of which 2 are absent.
I haven't heard that. That one I gotta keep that one in the back of my mind.
But sometimes it just gets too big, I guess, is what I'm trying to.
I had a meeting, there is a team that gets together, every quarter. And we were in our last meeting, and it involved it involves all the time those who are involved in working with folks who are impacted either by substance abuse, alcohol, other drugs, and what is being done to help work with those folks. And, so there has been discussion, and I can promise you, I always bring up the impact on the city. The police chief's been there occasionally on impact on social services and what are they doing to help limit that. We have requested, for instance, more outpatient services and outreach to those folks down when they come down here. Keith Morrison operates the bus, which stops here in front of City Hall, and he interacts with those that are here, and sometimes those are very intoxicated. The bus is now going up to the Wells Fargo area to make sure they pick up people there. So they're not totally disengaged. I just want to make sure that there are ongoing conversations with Rhonda Burnett. They've just gotten a new director up there to replace Lance Johnson. And Rhonda Schneider now has always been there. Butch Ephraim will be there. Shoni Evans, all the people that that I know of that are interacting very often with that clientele.
Can I ask a separate?
Yeah.
I was going to ask Mike or Bob, do we have days, like certain days, there's a bigger tax on emergency or more emergency calls or police calls than any given day? I mean, is it all pretty equal? I mean, is it like Friday
There's
night?
variations, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, if, there's certain,
It just depends. I can't say there's a distinctive pattern that I'm aware of. It just
it's not like Friday night, we have 50% more calls.
I just received a text from Gray Harrison saying that since the fire over here, that we're getting way more calls down behind the gas station down here. Of people being, farther down on Front Street, hiding behind the building and stuff down that way more now.
We get, I can answer a little bit because these guys are just not thinking about it. When we get the monthly checks that people receive for disability, and then when the PFD hits the banks. And that's another, or when other government, those are, I think you guys would agree, that's when we, see a spike in use of city services.
Yep, I was just curious. Thanks.
You had mentioned about the officer that's pouring out bottles or working more on the streets at night. Is that he's a regular officer or?
it is. It's one of our full time. Plus, we have the CSO, Joe Lambert, and he also does patrols at night. He works till 2 in the morning.
How about during the day? Do we have anybody?
We're hoping to get a second CSO, and of course, it's been difficult right now to try and find someone. So we're still doing our efforts to do everything we can to try and find that person. But you want the right person with the right demeanor, and it's a difficult job, because you're dealing with a lot of inebriated people, throughout the day. So it's finding the right person is what we're after. Hopefully, our efforts are rewarded soon. But we're doing what we can.
And the advertising for that, I did notice City of Nome advertising. I think Nome announced maybe in the paper, and I don't see that CSO position listed. Is that?
It should have been.
Yeah, I was told that it had been advertised by Janice.
Okay.
There's 6 or 7 positions, joined the team. This week because we're in need of dispatchers, we're just emphasizing dispatch positions. But we've advertised for CSO, the assistant city manager, a grants writer. I could go up and get the paper. I know that on average we at least have 6 positions areas, I should say, not positions, areas that we're looking for people.
Just curious if the bottles that are getting poured out, are they big ones, are they little ones, just all kinds? Just curious.
It's an assortment, of course. You know, Ray Harrison actually found a bunch of them that the officer didn't empty out. They were still on the back of the pickup truck today. So, but his efforts, he continually does it, and you know,
There's all sorts. There's not really one. Yeah, I'm just curious, what do you think about this? Or I don't know if you're willing to, but what do you think about these, some of these
Well,
items?
I support any efforts that we try and, like Mr. Steckman said, that any efforts to try and reduce the amount of sexual assaults and stuff like that. It's I guess the proof will be in the pudding. We'd find out.
Okay.
And I guess it might have sounded a little bit that we were dissing on Norton Sound for their, you know, what they are or are not doing. You know, I guess, you know, that's one of the reasons that Keith is down here, you know, as a program director, to try to get the folks to go and utilize their services. And that was, you know, a thing Lance Johnson said, I don't know how many times, is we can offer all we want, but if they're not willing to accept it, it's, you know, we can't force them to do it. And that, you know, is the observation that, you know, I've seen in a number of cases, you know, having been there with emergency services, that, you know, you can offer and you know, encourage, but, you know, unless there's a willingness, it ain't gonna happen.
Can I ask a question on the seventh proposed one that's not on the list? That was basically sharing of the folks that are on conditions. Is that public information already? How accessible is it, or how easy to access that? I think we've talked about this before. It might be kind of challenging to find if you're just, you know, Joe citizen.
I don't know enough about it, but we asked the state's, you know, Mr. Earthman, that, you know, one, is this information public? Yes. And two was, could his office or show us where we could access it and make sure that, because this had also been one of these discussions in the meeting, and we didn't have the answer at that time when this was drawn up.
Mhm.
I said, I'd have to look into it.
So it's a common used tool, long time ago.
Right.
20, 30 years, there's always had an 86 list. The people that worked inside the establishments knew who were on that list, and they kind of paid attention to it, and worked with the local cops to, you know, hand in hand to say, hey, somebody won't leave, they're on this list or whatever, and so it was, of course, it's not good to be on the list, but it also gave the,
So it used to be distributor shared, and it's no longer.
yeah,
Or
some-
it
at
stopped
some
at
point it
some
stopped.
point.
The state passed it out to all the bars and liquor stores. I mean, that was,
So we're gonna go back to hopefully something that looks a little bit like what we used to do in terms of the distribution of.
well, and I don't know, I mean, because
That's a great idea.
this has to do with liquor stores. I don't know whether they're intending to pass those out to bars too.
Right now, we were looking at liquor stores. I was informed that one of the liquor stores or chains down in Anchorage had, if you swiped your license or ID through, it could tell them whether they could sell you alcohol or not. I'm hearing it's in existence, but obviously it's another software program. So the suggestion is we'll go back the old fashioned way. I would think it would behoove both of the local dispensers up here to look at trying to see if that technology really exists to be able to have people swipe their cards.
Is it part of this MOU, could we ask that both distributors keep, even if it's a paper list of folks, and then they could be cross-checked when they're, because I don't think IDs necessarily, state-issued IDs, do they have that? There used to be a marking, and I know we've talked about this before, if people are on alcohol conditions, It used to be
They're
on your
supposed
state
to,
ID
yep.
or driver's license, but there's probably a lot of IDs that are accepted that are not state issued that don't have that. And so I'm just wondering if it makes sense to ask the distributors to have that list of folks that may have alcohol restrictions.
And isn't that what's coming from the DA?
That's,
Yes.
so we're gonna be doing that.
Okay, anything more on this? Otherwise, we've consumed, yeah, I guess one more time on the phone, Sig? Great, thank you, Sig. Any other on the phone? All right, great. Well, it's scheduled for consideration by the council later in this meeting. And then I believe city manager indicated that the attorney, anyway, somebody's working on fluffing up, putting the legalese into it so that then it can be signed.
Right, it would include everything that was discussed tonight, and we would also recommend going to quarterly meetings. And then I'll ask the council who they would like to also sit with, essentially it's been the mayor and I at this point, because we've been the ones going down and having the conversations with AMCO, who on the council would like to also sit in and be part of, reviewing where everything is with the city and with Car Safeway and Northwest Commercial.
Okay, great, thanks, Joe and Laura, appreciate it.
I was just gonna ask you a quick process question. So probably, assuming all parties in agreement, there will probably be an MOU signed prior to the next regular council meeting. And I assume a copy of the final signed one will be in the packet, just for distribution, so we can all.
Everything will be transparent.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay.
Except for we won't have that to really consider prior to this resolution tonight.
Well, I mean, all the ideas have been discussed. It's gonna be in this. I mean, I've already had this discussion with Brooks. We were a little behind on this because Murbach got in the way, and then we had problems with emails that we thought were going through and were not going through. So, and I was working on this when I was on vacation, trying to get this done so we could make the December meeting of AMCO.
So for process wise, what, the MOU goes through AMCO?
The MOU will be reviewed. This is a blessing by AMCO that this is how the community is trying to resolve an issue that was raised in front of AMCO. They'll recognize it.
It's more information for them, I mean, it's not,
Right.
They're not-
Nothing legal.
it's nothing legal on that, but through all these processes, we've asked for AMCO to be involved in it. Joan Wilson, spent an extra day or two while she was here for the meetings, the director, and has, routinely communicated with the city, and I think also with the licensees potentially as well, so. So whether we, adopt this resolution later saying that the city manager can sign an MOU, if you want the actual document, that will fall off the agenda tonight.
And I think it's important to note too, this is kind of a living I'm assuming it'll be a living document, sort of where we can make changes to it down the road, especially if we're taking a look at it every 90 days. And
Correct.
so if things come up, we can say, hey, this should be addressed, and I like that approach.
Okay, we better flip gears here. We've had Rowan sitting there for however long with Gray. And Chief, did you want to say anything about this or just give it to
Well,
Gray?
I can tell you that Gray has done an awesome job. He has a lot of hats that he wears for the police department, and we are very, very fortunate to have him on this project. I think he, among anybody else in the police department, has done a lot of stuff to get us in line with accreditation. And it's a slow process, but I'll let him tell you about it. And, it's one piece at a time.
I just interject. We wanted to keep you abreast as the council. You approved us going through accreditation. We want to let you know where the process is, and that all of this is being reviewed by Sam Severin, who is with Brooks Chandler as one of Chandler, Boyd Chandler. And so that we have 3 years to get this done, for accreditation, and we're in our first year, and things are moving along fairly well. So, and then I would ask you, Mayor, to turn it over to Gray, who
Did this go to the people that were line.
I asked,
Right.
Bryant to, send them a copy, scanned and send them a copy.
Okay, hopefully, everybody that's, not in the room did, through their email, get, the copy of the, memorandum that is being referred to. But, Gray, were you able to hang out with us? Okay, great. If, Chief, introduced you and, gave you some accolades, if you didn't hear them, thank you, we all agree. And if you go through this, give us this up-to-date, report, for those that may not have, received it in, their email.
And those cameras are required as part of this accreditation process. There'll be other items that we're gonna have to address, as part of the accreditation process.
Great, any questions for our NPD reps? Greg, Bob, Mike?
So it sounds like we're on track. I mean, I know it's a couple more years, but we're on track to be certified or accredited within that 3-year window. There's no red flags that say, oh, we might have a problem or something. Great work, man. Thank you.
Super, does anybody on the phone have any questions? Comments? Okay, if not, thank you, Gray. Appreciate your time, and Bob and Mike as well, who are here in the room. And we're going to take a couple-minute break here before 7 o'clock.
Yeah, do you want it?
No, not an extra copy.
I'm still stuck in the paper mode, man. I brought my laptop.
Does Kelly need a copy?
I don't know, she got it by email too.
Yeah, I'm looking on the email.
Oh,
Okay.
I can't look at those on the phone and follow the package. It's too small.
It's just, well, you can write notes, you know. Didn't work out when I tried to make notes on my laptop screen. Yeah. Where's your trip?
Huh?
Where's your trip?
It was
Or vacation? Was it a vacation?
No, it was not a vacation. I'm helping, my wife and I are working to get our son, who is now living in Florida, but he still has a house in Reading. Pennsylvania, up and ready for sale. And, the first week was his house, the second week was our house that my wife lives at. And we'll be doing the same thing when I leave here again, because the goal is to get the house. I don't think he should put the house on the market until February, March, but he's getting a lot of pressure from his father-in-law to get it on the market in January. But the house needed a major update.
Yeah, this is a tough time there with house sales.
Well, that's why
Pressure
that's why
before it gets worse.
Well, that's what, when people are gonna be dealing with the interest rates, the house needs to be ready. It's gotta have the right colors.
Curb appeal.
Huh?
Curb appeal.
Correct. The last house I sold was the first time I ever had, a bidding war on it.
My old banker told me one time, he said, if you wanna, sell like a house or a building or something, take lots of, outside pictures when it's sunny. But if you really wanna sell it, take a picture of the kids playing on the front yard, front lawn. Seal the deal.
Well, pictures can, sometimes say 1,000 words, or when you get there, you discover they're really saying about 10 words.
Yeah.
The presentation, as you well know, is everything.
Curb appeal is important for sure. There's no garbage.
Not yet.
Oh, wait, damn.
Just like reducing the size of the bottle, if you're trying to reduce what we eat by these small plates.
Well, but the pieces are bigger too. Brian wasn't as chintzy this time in cutting the cut.
At least he didn't cover it with garlic.
I forgot the double cut. And I walked down, Milano's wasn't picking up, and I ordered from Airport Pizza, but I still went to Milano's, and it was like outside of Milano's. I'm like,
Did you hear what I said? Are you trying to reduce the amount of pizza we eat by reducing the size of the plates? Like that.
I think these things do go stale, Mark.
Oh, you found one?
John, I forgot to get my rules. It has to be right back.
Hey Glenn, did you see that picture? It was in the news a couple days ago about that airplane in Maryland that got caught up in the power lines.
No, I didn't see
I
that.
didn't know if it was close by to where you were at. Did you see that?
Mhm.
Where it's like, there were like several people on board and they were stuck in there for like
Where was
quite a
that?
few hours.
Remember the,
It's somewhere in Maryland.
Maryland's a long state. Might not be very thick, but it's a long state.
You know what I mean. But anyways, yeah, they were in there for like a long time before they were able to rescue them.
I missed that one.
Caught the plane and everything.
That's one that, where he was saying that if they were lucky it wasn't windy or they would have all been dead.
That's amazing.
There's a lot of small airports in Maryland. Or I should say general aviation airports.
Yeah, we went to Plum Point for quite a few years.
Okay, are we, need another minute or two to chew? Great, the time is 7:04. Call the regular meeting of the Nome County Council for Monday, November 28th, rescheduled to Wednesday, November 30th, to order. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll to establish a quorum?
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Youth Representative Miller.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Mark Johnson. Just with regard to that, I wanted to comment on what is included or not included on the agenda. At the last meeting, there were some suggestions to add ancillary items to the agenda, specifically the pledge and a land acknowledgement. And I received some comments finding that offensive to various folks. And I simply determined, being it's not required by our code, that we would not be adding to the agenda unless the code is changed. So that's the comment on that. And unless there are any changes to the agenda, I'd ask for a roll call on its adoption.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of the minutes, November 14th regular meeting. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. If there are no noted additions, deletions, or corrections other than ministerial, roll call please on their adoption. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yep.
You're referring to Cool Martinson.
Okay, that's a ministerial correction, and the city clerk can take care of that. Thank you for pointing it out. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us on to communications. The first item at page 9 is from the state of Alaska with the full value determination, which they must issue each year. Mr. Clerk, did you have anything you wanted to say about that specifically? Okay, no, that's fine.
No, I'll get with Cameron later. I'm still looking for that mistake.
Okay.
No, this comes out this time every year. We've had some discussion on its impact on how the state assessor adds in property after we call it exempt, or they add in if they think that we are underestimating our value. And if you'd like follow up with me later, I can try to rehash some of that conversation.
And
Councilmember
is
Henderson.
this what we use then as the final determination that guides the school contributions?
Yes.
So this is kind of the final.
In my understanding, that's the only major thing that this has an impact on.
And there's really no, as far as you know, there's not any major differences between what the city comes up with and this number. generally there might be a little bit of adjustments, but nothing
Oh,
major.
they're
usually add
millions,
they usually
it's
add-
millions different.
Oh, they add,
usually add in about $40 million in equipment, because they think that we under-assess our equipment. It's been an ongoing issue.
interesting. Okay, thanks.
The next is from the Alaska Business Development Center. Go ahead.
Every year, the Alaska Business Development Center sends us something similar. This is kind of still following on the pattern that we used to do the NSCDC Community Benefits Share to community programs. They would put in a very similar proposal every year for the CBS funds. They've done it regardless, and they do come to Nome every year, and they exactly who they help, I'm not sure. I knew they did help Councilmember Anderson at one point, so he was a big fan of them. But they do provide a useful service throughout the region.
The issue is, I think some years we have given a contribution.
To ABTC. Well, I saw are they asking for 2,000?
Yes.
They requested, so we contribute 2,000. And I said, on page 13, there's a pretty good table on kind of the breakdown of the assistance that's provided. So it looks like actually quite a few folks, not only in Nome, but in the region, are helped. And it looks like, I'm assuming there's other communities, based on same page 13, that there's a lot of other communities that actually contribute as well. So sounds like
So I think just to point out also that right at the very beginning here, this program provides these services directly to low and moderate income English as a second language and elderly residents. So they're not working with complex tax issues that we need to go to someone else for, but probably without this assistance, they would not be in compliance like some of us are not in compliance.
so we don't.
I did talk to my tax accountant today.
This is an administrative decision.
Yeah, Glenn, can you find $2,000?
Yes, sir.
Any objection to that? Okay, thank you. Next, preschool association. Just wanting to make sure we don't forget about them when it comes to budgeting again.
Well, they were included in this year's budget, so they're all taken care of.
Okay. Then we have a notice from AMCO with regard to the Breaking Bar Corporation license renewal. Does the council wish to take any action on this? The next we have is from the Northwest Company. Says it's for Nome Liquor Store, but it's a seasonal license. I think they've mislabeled that it should not say seasonal after it. Does the council wish to take any action on this license?
This isn't the same one because they come up every 2 years, right?
But this is the same one that we started
this the
this
same
whole
one?
process last year.
Right.
They only got it 1 year.
Oh, okay, so it's the same one.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and that is the extent of the communications. We'll move on to citizens' comments. And unless there's a unidentified citizen on the Zoom that wishes to speak, there's no one in the audience. That'll take us on to unfinished business. And we have ordinance 22-11-01 for second reading. Mr. Clerk?
022-1101, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of municipal property by easement to the state of Alaska, Department of Public Transportation and Public Facilities for the incorporation into the Nome right-of-way, Port Road right-of-way reconstruction project.
Mouthful, okay. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance, oh, I'm sorry. Ordinance 22-11-01 is now in public hearing. Are there members of the public that wish to address this ordinance this evening? Seeing no indication, we are back in session and ask for a motion to adopt ordinance 22-11-01.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Piscoya, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman, or Mr. Clerk?
If you look at page 18, in the recitals, there is number 6, the city of Nome will convey an interest in the identified parcels by easement consistent with the code requirement of the city retaining a reversionary interest. The easement is limited by a requirement that the property must continue to be used as a public right-of-way. When I discussed this with Sam Severin, our legal counsel, he thought that this was sufficient. But if you want to go further, then.
This has to do with federal highway funds. I don't think we're going to take Port Road back. And I would recommend that to keep this project moving, that we not have any amendment to the easement. We could just simply add to here a notice that it's in accordance with and list our ordinance number, so that would tie it back. Thank you, Bill, for pointing that out. Are there any other questions or comments with regard to this, which is an easement to DOT so that Port Road can be upgraded? Seeing none, roll call please on the adoption of ordinance 22-11-01.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Tapcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to resolution 22-11-02. Mr. Clerk, would you read that by title?
R22-11-02, a resolution designating Charles Chip Leeper as acting city manager for December 17, 2022 to January 2, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 22-11, or resolution 22-11-02?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Piscoya. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Piscoya. Councilmember Tapcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson. Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to resolution 22-11-03.
R22-11-03, a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of understanding with Northwest Commercial Company and Cars Safeway for voluntary regulation of alcohol sales.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 22-11-03?
I'll make the motion.
Oh, yeah, there you are. Unfortunately, when somebody's in the room, they usually get noted more often. So Councilmember Henderson. Somebody help us out on the phone here. Councilmember Martinson, can you second that, please? Thank you. All right, is there any discussion? The actual final legalese is being worked on with the city attorney, and a copy of the completed document will be provided to the council at the next meeting. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Sequoia. Motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes new business. Moving on to utility report, normally done by Mr. Morton. I excused him tonight to help get ready for the Fireman's Carnival that's happening this week. And there really isn't anything earth-shattering to report from the utility at this point other than normal operations. The Christmas lights are on. People seem to like that. And thanks to the fire department for organizing and collecting the funds to actually purchase those, and the utility assisted in putting them up. Still had some discussions with DEC with regard to the West Nome Tank Farm site, and another meeting will be held here in the short run, hopefully getting to the culmination of with a deed from the Air Force. Mr. Steckman?
First of all, I want to thank Brian for holding the fort down for the last 2 weeks and no major storms or anything like that. Really not much to report other than the issue with this, and there asking for an executive session on some personnel related issues. And I want to remind everybody that AML is happening next week, so some of the staff and some of you will be down in Anchorage for that. And one of the things getting back into normal that many people are happy about is obviously the Fireman's Carnival, but also Christmas extravaganza, which we're hoping to have well represented by various groups in town for the lighting of the Christmas tree by the mayor and the visit by Santa Claus that takes place a week from tomorrow, December 8th at 5:30 p.m. Come and share some coffee, hot chocolate, and some cookies.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Councilmember Henderson?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of meetings ago, we got a pack in our packet, and I think it was one of the meetings that were canceled with a number of abatements that were going to be happening. And I think it was a month or two, it might have even been before the storm. And then I think there was did those get done, or I don't think the council ever was involved in those decisions, but
We never did have the public hearings. The storm intervened in it, and so the process stopped, and we'll have to release.
so those abatements weren't.
Well, actually, there were some abatements done. The Larson property has been brought down. There's a property on Division Street where is going to be coming down. We put it out to bid. It's what's Duffy's address on Division?
413 division.
Yeah, if you go up on Division, there is a shed that if the right snow will drop it or lean into somebody's property that we've just gotten the bids on. We solicited bids, received one bid back to take it down before the end of the year. Then we'll resume the process this spring.
And I think some of the properties actually got taken down by the property owners,
Well,
so I think that.
that's always the goal,
Right, okay.
but we were involved in taking down the Larson, but that became because we became the owners of the property during the abatement process. And I'm trying to, and there's, we had to take down the Bronson house because it was getting ready to collapse because of foundation issues.
So the ones that we did, we actually own the properties.
Right.
Thanks.
And obviously, they voluntarily abated. We didn't have to go through the process that you, I think, or almost had to go through with the Polaris. We worked with them, with the property owners of the Bering Sea Restaurant.
That's all. Thanks.
Other questions? Not, we'll go to another opportunity for citizens to comment. And now we'll move on to council member comments. Would you call the roll, Mr. Clerk?
Your report report?
Yes, sir.
Or is that just included for?
Yeah, it's just included
There's
in the
nothing
package.
major to, okay.
Roll call.
Councilmember Henderson.
What are we doing? Oh, we're not voting, we're council comments. Yes.
Oh, you vote yes?
Very briefly, I will make a comment about what I had requested. The last meeting, Pledge of Allegiance, to be said, apparently some found it offensive. Mayor, I respect your position to basically set the agenda. I think also that it's an important issue. I don't want to debate it tonight, but I just want to let you know that as a council member, it's our prerogative to request a change in the agenda at the beginning of every meeting. And I will be requesting at every meeting that we change the agenda to include the Pledge of Allegiance. And I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Johnson.
So I voted yes along with everybody else on the MOU thing, but I did have mixed feelings about it. I reached out to several people last few days and I also got mixed feelings back. I think a lot of people recognize that there is an issue and some of the people were totally against the city getting involved with businesses, and I can somewhat relate to that. One of the comments from somebody who was actually for the idea as long as we look at it, not in 6 months, but every 3 months, and see if there's a measure to try to figure out if it's working or not. That was exactly their comment. They said, we're from the government, we're here to help. That was one of their comments, and so it's something that, I hope that it does help. I think it's a much bigger issue and I question whether it will solve what we're trying to solve, but maybe it'll be a small part of the issue. I did want to point out some good things that I did read in the local newspaper, or in Anchorage Daily News, about the infrastructure plan and some positive future things coming to Nome. Just in the list, we have Nome, $2.3 million to North Sound Health Corporation for construction of a child care facility. $1.6 million coming to Nome for safe drinking water distribution and wastewater collection. I personally hope that they can increase that, especially for our region, because we don't have that in many places. We're lucky here in Nome to have what we have, but I was looking down on the list, hoping that would be something much larger than that for the region. But also coming to Nome was $2 million to rehabilitate the Bering Sea Women's Shelter, and $5 million to North Sound Health Corporation to construct patient housing and affordable housing for low-income employees. By pointing those things out, they're not a done deal because they still have to pass through Congress, I think, on how they're gonna spend some of the infrastructure money, but they are in the list actually, and I guess applaud Norton Sound for doing excellent lobbying in order to even get on that list to be able to do that, because it will be positive for Nome to have any projects that come here that spend money. It puts people to work. it's positive for Nome, but frustratingly, so I'm not dishing Norton Sound, but I'd really like to see, and I think we should really make a ploy as a city to be part of this problem, or part of this, solving this issue is to have a treatment center. People have been talking about it for more than a decade, maybe a couple of decades now, and I think that we should really invite Norton Sound into the city hall to further discuss what they could do to assist with trying to help remedy the health problem that we have with alcohol. That's it, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinson. Councilmember Fiscoya.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Tapcock.
I apologize, it got unfortunately pushed aside. I got your email, I think today, and I'll be back in touch with you so we can get this wrapped up and get it onto a work session so it can be discussed there before and introduced maybe that night. Youth Representative Miller.
I have nothing.
Thank you for sitting so patiently listening to us jabber at each other.
I do have a question for her, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Please.
I would like to schedule probably now after the first of the year with you and hopefully Councilmember Pistoia to get a good tour of city operations. And any other council member that would want to join us, take you down, show you the backbone of the city.
Great. Thank you. And that's the end of the roll call?
It's all you.
Okay, great. Well, I only had 3 things written down and Glenn covered 2 of them. That being the Christmas extravaganza and the fire department carnival going on. Of course, the weather is turning into carnival weather as it does every single year. We'll hope that it abates a little bit before Saturday. And frankly, I think people are so ready to have this that they're not going to give a darn if they have to wade through the snow to get there. It's been a long time in coming. So I hope you'll get out and support the fire department in that effort. And they do a hell of a job year round with little thanks. So come out and show your support in their fundraising activities, because the majority of that money goes to buy equipment that otherwise would be something the city would have to be taking care of. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that the animal clinic is going on this week. There's I believe an advertisement, I saw it on Facebook at least, that you can get your city license and inoculations at the Animal House through Saturday this week, I believe. So my 4 went out today, and anybody that has some that need to get there, now's a great time to take advantage of that. And it's not, that the city collects a few bucks for a license fee. It's that the pets are inoculated. So encourage you to do that. With that, ask for a motion to recess into executive session on personnel matters, the immediate knowledge, which could have an adverse effect on city of Nome finance.
Motion.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Mark Johnson. Seeing no objection, we are in executive session at 7:37.
Glenn, I invited Nancy. So, no problem. You're welcome.
Remind me about 4:30 in the afternoon.
Okay. Oh.
Great. Okay, unfortunately, you don't get to participate in these. And if we can clear the screen of everybody else that shouldn't be on here.
So was the coffee good, Mark?
It was very good.
Good, I made it. Wasn't, I was gonna say Brian made it.
Well, it was good. Come to go too.
Good to the last drop. No, that's Maxwell House. This is Folgers.
I'm just gonna switch over to the.
Okay.
Warm it up.
Okay, we're gonna make the phone available to council members to call back in. And
Texting you the number now if you don't know it.
so the Zoom or the Teams meeting is being turned off now.
Do you have the number?
Brian's getting
It's weird when you're just on a phone call now instead of Zoom or Teams or something.
Oh,
Still works best in that.
It's just weird. It's like, oh my God, there's a way to Teams meeting.
well, I've been having trouble with Zoom. I sent out one invite and it showed up 10